My friends, we are taking some very important precautions for the health of everyone. Science is teaching us, as we will learn during our forum, that it is not healthy for us to have singing going on with other people in the same room as the singer. And so Bryn Holdsworth, our soloist today, is in a completely different room from Ernest and me in the nave. And then the same kind of science is applicable to exuberant preaching. And consequently, I am in a room by myself in our parish hall to be able to preach without a mask, which I simply didn't want to interfere with the expressions of this sermon. So thank you for being patient with all of our what heretofore would be strange choices. I feel called to speak with you this morning about the topic of pandemic spirituality. I've been helped in today's appointed readings and also by a friend's reflections on her recent bicycle accident, which resulted in a concussion. Furthermore, had I preached this sermon before Friday's deaths of civil rights, justice, and nonviolence giants, C.T. Vivian and John Lewis, this would be quite a different sermon. I will treat their lives as part of the textual material enriching and guiding these thoughts. But first, my friend's bike accident and concussion. During her first visit to the emergency room, she was concerned only with the 12 stitches in her chin right after her bicycle accident. But because she was totally preoccupied with an upcoming Zoom conference at which she was presenting for more than 1,000 learners, she was not aware that she had suffered a concussion. However, following the Zoom conference, she said, I started experiencing dizziness, lightheadedness, and disorientation, all symptoms of a full-blown concussion. She later wrote, I landed in the ER 2 more times in early July and was told that I had multiple concussion syndrome due to previous head injuries in the last 5 years. I had to cease all writing and computer work as well as driving and drinking alcohol. She was in crisis. She couldn't help but reflect, nevertheless, on the meaning of all this and to compare her multiple concussion syndrome to the pandemic we are in. She came upon some new ways to talk about God that are helping me deeply these days and also help me have an even deeper understanding of what drove the Reverend C.T. Vivian and U.S. Representative John Lewis to be the instruments and guiding lights of nonviolence and of justice that they have been for us for 95 years with Reverend Vivian and 80 years for John Lewis. In reflecting on her concussion, my friend, whose name is Elia, made 3 points that have energized me this morning. Now, suffice it to say that Elia is a huge critic of seeing God as a big being over us and out there. So rather, we're in for some intimate talk about God and us. Number one, rather than the big God out there, my friend said in her post-concussion reflection that God is the ultimate, eternal, divine horizon of our unique personal existence. That God is a horizon is completely new for me in every event of our lives. I was taught by my parents and teachers to be a person who chose a lofty and distant horizon about my life. It was a kind of a choice that leaders make. And my brother and I were told by our parents that we were to be leaders with broad and distant horizons. Our horizons were to be more distant than the town we grew up in. But my point is that our horizons were to be part of our orientation to life, our mindset. But here, my friend Elia is saying, no, this is not something that you set and choose for yourself and then strive to go there, but that when we allow for there to be a God dimension or God consciousness in our lives, God becomes our horizon, and thus our horizon is the nature of God things and God values and God perspective. So God as our horizon is my first point about pandemic spirituality. God is presence, a live, living presence in us as a new horizon. I've gone to school about John Lewis recently, just in the last 2 days, and he frequently spoke of a power that claimed him to do all the things that he began to call getting into good trouble and getting in the way of systemic racism and other injustices. He said it was like a power that claimed me and drove me to move from being beaten during the freedom rides to being beaten again on Bloody Sunday, and then to run for Congress and to get arrested more than 45 times for justice, all the time loving those who hurt me, loving those who didn't understand me. It was this power. My friend Elia writes, God is the absolute future of my life in this moment. In every moment, think that God is your future. God is your horizon. My life and God's life are unified in a single flow of life. And in this moment, therefore, I must decide who and what I exist for. Am I with God or am I not in this pandemic? Am I with God or not in this concussion? Am I with God or not in this struggle for racial reckoning? Am I with God or not in this economic crisis? Am I mindful of God or forgetful of God, wrapped up in my own self, which has such a limited horizon, to be wrapped up only in my own self? We seldom realize that a God consciousness of the present moment, or lack thereof, determines the future of our lives. I love that sentence. Just imagine all the turning points in your life that had to do with your awakening consciousness. And because of that, your life went in a completely different direction. I could fill a book, an autobiographical memoir of all the times a new consciousness literally changed my life. I mean, think about mask wearing. I think a lot about ventilators. In each of those moments, am I with God or not? Do I understand God as my horizon? Point number 2. So God is horizon, living horizon, is point number 1 in my argument about what pandemic spirituality is. Number 2, my friend Elia writes, life is a series of momentary God events. In each moment, God is creating, waiting, responding, loving, and caring for us, with God as the root reality of our lives. She asks, what doors can open in a state of concussion? And her answer is the doors of patience and mindfulness and gratitude and living the momentary events of our lives as blessed events. As I started experiencing the effects of the concussion, she says, I began to realize the preciousness of God's and life's moments and the great insight of living in the now, for the present moment is really all we have. Every moment is a blessed event, a God event. The great contemplative Thomas Keating says, God will bring people and events into our lives, and whatever we may think about those people or those events, each is designed for the evolution of God's life within us. Every time you get perturbed or annoyed during this pandemic, every time you have to wear a mask when you really don't want to, and wash your hands, and maintain social distancing, and not be able to see this beloved person or that beloved person, please, point number 2 in pandemic spirituality says, please, look at how this moment is about the evolution of God's life within you. We have all been knocked off our horse, like St. Paul on the road to Damascus. We all have had a bit of concussion. But Psalm 139, the psalm appointed for today, and my friends, this is my second favorite psalm in all of the psalms. First is Psalm 23, then 139. You may have your favorites. But the psalmist prays, where can I go from your presence? If I'm in a pandemic, you are there. If I'm in the process of racial reckoning in my nation, you are there also. If I have to go to the hospital, and I'll have to go by myself. If I have to be put on a ventilator, you are there also. Point number 3. We are intertwined with God and with everyone else on the planet. The old story of separateness and hierarchy in terms of gender and race and class, that story is coming to an end. We are seeing this pandemic as a portal through which we dare not take the dead carcasses of discrimination and skin hierarchy into the new world. We sang, newborn worlds are rising. That is the essence of Christianity. And in order for us to go into these new worlds of interwovenness, we will have to understand that to grow into my authentic self is to grow into God, which requires a vigilant mindfulness of each moment I engage life. Thomas Merton and St. Augustine said it so well, to find God is to find myself, and to find myself is to find God. For God is more interior to me than I am to myself. John Lewis said that he frequently had to have executive sessions with himself, where he weighed out the calls of the culture with the calls of his conscience. Wouldn't it be wonderful to understand our spiritual life as an ongoing executive session with the Spirit? of God. The root of my life is God's life. And the root of God's life is my life. Let me sum it all up this way. All of Romans 8, which we just read by Bob Long, is about intimacy with God. God is not a bully. God is an intimate friend in such a way that we and the whole world and all of history are pregnant. Something new is being born in this pandemic and in all of our other crises facing us now. I get letters from people, not only in this parish, but throughout the world, who are really taken by the Learn, Pray, Act agenda. People are unlearning amazing things to learn new things. People are praying in new ways to have executive sessions with God every time they close their eyes or walk meditatively or contemplatively. People are gathering together in committees and action groups to do acts of mercy for people who live on live with homelessness, or to take acts of policy change and advocacy. It's amazing what's going on. It is such a fertile time. In other words, all of us are in gestation. The spirituality of the pandemic is gestation spirituality. Live in an executive session with yourself and with God and your conscience. And ask the question constantly, what is being born anew in me? Am I in favor of it? And am I going to get on board with God or not? That's the question. Amen.